I caught my wife in a secret affair with the neighbor she claimed was just a friend, and now our entire neighborhood knows about it. My name is David, 36M, and I've been married to Emily, 34F, for 10 years. We have a peaceful life in a quiet neighborhood where everyone seems to know each other. Recently, I started noticing that Emily was spending more time outside, talking to our neighbor, Mark, 38M. At first, it seemed innocent enough. They'd chat in the driveway, laugh a little, and then go back inside. But soon, I noticed the conversations were getting longer. She started inviting him over for coffee when I wasn't home, and she'd spend hours outside with him in the evenings. Something didn't feel right, and I knew I needed to get to the bottom of it. When I confronted Emily about it, she brushed it off, saying they were just being friendly. Mark is lonely, she told me, and he enjoys the company. Besides, it's nice to have someone around when you're at work. Her words didn't sit well with me. I trusted her, but there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. I told her it made me uncomfortable, but she just laughed, calling me paranoid. I tried to believe her, to let it go, but every time I saw them together, that gut feeling came back stronger. I started paying closer attention, watching for any sign that there was more going on than she let on. One evening, I came home earlier than usual and found them in the backyard, sitting far too close for comfort. They looked startled when they saw me, like they'd been caught. Emily quickly made up an excuse, saying they were just enjoying the sunset, but I wasn't buying it. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she wouldn't meet my gaze. Mark left soon after, and I confronted her again, demanding to know what was really going on. She insisted it was innocent, that they were just friends, but her words felt hollow. I knew there was more to this, and I was determined to find out the truth. I started paying closer attention to her routine, watching for any signs that she was lying to me. I noticed she'd leave the house at odd hours, claiming she was running errands or meeting up with friends. But one day, I decided to follow her. I watched as she drove to a secluded park on the other side of town, where Mark was waiting for her. They sat together on a bench, talking closely, their heads nearly touching. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal wash over me. She had been lying to me all along, sneaking around with him behind my back. My mind raced, and I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. When she got home that night, I confronted her again, my anger barely contained. "How long have you been sneaking off to meet him?" I demanded. She looked shocked, as if she hadn't expected me to find out. She tried to deny it, but I told her I'd seen them together. She finally admitted they'd been meeting in secret for months, but she insisted it was harmless. "We're just friends, David. He's going through a rough time, and I'm just being there for him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had betrayed my trust, lied to my face, and now she was trying to downplay it, acting as if I was overreacting. I told her I wasn't stupid, that I could see through her lies. She tried to convince me that it was all innocent, that she just enjoyed having someone to talk to. But the more she talked, the more I realized how deep this betrayal went. She had been meeting him in secret, spending time with him behind my back, and now she wanted me to believe it was nothing. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I needed some space, that I couldn't look at her right now. She seemed hurt, but I didn't care. I walked out, needing to clear my head, needing to figure out what I was going to do. Over the next few days, I barely spoke to her. I spent my nights at a friend's place, trying to process everything. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd lied to me, the way she kept this secret for months. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for believing her lies. I started questioning everything, wondering if there had been other lies, other secrets she kept from me. The thought made me sick. I knew I couldn't go on like this, living in a constant state of doubt and suspicion. I needed answers, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get them. One evening, I decided to confront Mark. I waited until he got home from work, then walked over to his house. He looked surprised to see me, but I didn't give him a chance to speak. "I know about you and Emily," I said, my voice steady, controlled. He tried to play dumb, acting like he didn't know what I was talking about. But I could see the guilt in his eyes, the way he shifted uncomfortably. I told him I'd seen them together, that I knew they'd been meeting in secret. He finally admitted they'd been spending time together, but insisted it was just friendly. I didn't buy it, not for a second. I told him to stay away from my wife, that I didn't want him anywhere near her. He looked like he wanted to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I walked away, feeling a surge of satisfaction. I had finally stood up to him, finally confronted the man who had been sneaking around with my wife. But the satisfaction was short-lived. I knew that my problems with Emily weren't over, that this confrontation had only scratched the surface. I still needed to deal with her, to figure out what was going to happen next. I couldn't ignore the betrayal, couldn't pretend that everything was okay. Things had to change. When I got home that night, Emily was waiting for me. She looked anxious, like she knew what I'd done. She asked if I'd talked to Mark, and I told her I had. I told her I'd confronted him, told him to stay away from her. She seemed taken aback, almost offended, but I didn't care. I asked her, one last time, to be honest with me. Tell me the truth, Emily. Are you in love with him? She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears, but she finally shook her head. No, David, it's not like that. I care about him, but I love you. Her words felt hollow, empty. I couldn't bring myself to believe her anymore. I told her that her words didn't mean anything to me anymore. You've been meeting him in secret for months, Emily. You've lied to me, betrayed me, and now you expect me to just believe that it was all innocent. She started crying, insisting that she never meant to hurt me, that it was just a friendship that had gotten out of hand. But I wasn't buying it. I couldn't shake the image of them together, the way they looked so comfortable, so close. I told her I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted to do. She begged me not to leave, but I turned my back on her, walking out into the night. I spent the next few days in a haze, unable to focus on anything but the betrayal. I kept replaying our conversations, remembering every lie, every excuse she'd made. I felt like I didn't even know her anymore, like she was a stranger. I thought about all the times she told me she loved me, all the promises we made to each other. They felt meaningless now, empty words spoken by someone who had no respect for our marriage. I knew I couldn't live like this, couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if she was being honest with me. I needed to make a decision, and I needed to make it soon. One night, I found myself outside Mark's house again. I don't know what I was expecting, but I needed to confront him one last time. He answered the door, looking surprised but not entirely shocked. You need to stay away from Emily, I told him, my voice low and steady. He tried to apologize, to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. I don't care about your excuses, I said. You've done enough damage. I don't ever want to see you near my wife again. He nodded, looking defeated, and I walked away, feeling a strange sense of closure. But I knew that my real battle was still with Emily. She was the one I needed answers from. When I got home, I found her sitting in the living room, waiting for me. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and swollen. We need to talk, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I sat down, waiting for her to explain herself, to tell me the truth once and for all. She took a deep breath, then finally admitted that she had feelings for Mark, that she'd been drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. But she insisted that nothing physical had happened, that they'd only ever talked. I felt a surge of anger, of betrayal, as I realized that our entire marriage had been built on lies. I asked her if she wanted to be with him, if she was willing to throw away our life together for someone she barely knew. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, David, I don't want to lose you. I made a mistake, and I'm so sorry. Please just give me a chance to make this right. But I couldn't bring myself to believe her. The trust had been shattered, the bond we'd once shared was gone. I told her I needed time, that I couldn't just forgive and forget. She begged me to stay, but I walked out, needing space to think, to figure out what I was going to do next. Over the next few weeks, we barely spoke. I spent most of my time at a friend's place, trying to process everything, trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage our marriage. I felt torn, part of me wanting to believe that she could change, that we could rebuild what we lost. But another part of me knew that things would never be the same. I couldn't shake the image of her with Mark, the way they looked so close, so intimate. I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if she was being honest with me. I needed answers, needed to know if our marriage was worth saving. One day she called me, asking if we could meet to talk things over. I agreed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could find some way to move forward. We met at a quiet cafe, and she looked nervous, unsure of what to say. She apologized again, telling me that she regretted everything, that she wished she could take it all back. But her words felt hollow, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I told her that I couldn't just forget what had happened, that the trust had been broken. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and I knew that our marriage was hanging by a thread. I asked her if she still had feelings for Mark, if she could honestly say that she was committed to our marriage. She hesitated, then finally admitted that she didn't know. She said she was confused, that she didn't understand why she felt so drawn to him. Her words cut deep, like a knife twisting in my heart. I realized then that I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep hoping that things would change. She had made her choice, whether she wanted to admit it or not. I told her I needed time to think, to decide if I could continue living like this. She nodded, looking defeated, and I walked away, feeling numb. As the days passed, I found myself questioning everything. I thought about the life we built together, the dreams we'd shared, the future we planned. It all felt so distant now, like a memory from a different lifetime. I wondered if I could ever truly forgive her, if I could ever look at her the same way again. I thought about Mark, about the way he'd looked at her, the way she'd seemed so comfortable with him. I realized that I couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly wondering if she was being honest with me. I knew I needed to make a decision, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. One evening, I found myself sitting in our empty house, surrounded by memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I thought about all the times she told me she loved me, all the promises we'd made to each other. They felt meaningless now, empty words spoken by someone who had no respect for our marriage. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if she was being honest with me. I made up my mind that night, made the decision to leave, to walk away from a marriage that had been built on lies. I couldn't stay with someone I couldn't trust. The next day, I told her I wanted a divorce. She looked shocked, like she hadn't expected me to follow through. She started crying, begging me to reconsider, telling me that she could change, that she would do whatever it took to fix things. But I had made up my mind. The trust was gone, and I couldn't imagine rebuilding our life together on the shattered remains of our marriage. I told her that I needed to move on, to find happiness on my own terms. She pleaded with me, telling me that she loved me. But I couldn't bring myself to believe her. I had heard enough lies, and I was done with the deception. As we started the process of separating, I found myself feeling a strange sense of relief. I no longer had to worry about what she was doing, about who she was with. I was free from the constant doubt, the endless questioning. I could finally focus on myself, on rebuilding my life. I spent my days packing up our things, dividing our belongings, and preparing for a new beginning. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right choice. I had given her my trust, my love, my loyalty, and she had thrown it all away. Now it was time for me to move on, to create a future that was free from lies. One day, she came by to pick up some of her things. She looked around the house, her eyes filled with sadness. "I never wanted this, David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I told her that I hadn't wanted it either, that I had loved her with everything I had. But she had made her choices, and now we both had to live with the consequences. She started crying, telling me that she wished she could take it all back, that she wished she had been honest with me from the beginning. But it was too late. The damage was done, and I knew that there was no going back. I had made my decision, and I was moving forward. As the weeks passed, I began to find a sense of peace. I no longer had to worry about her lies, about the secrets she had kept from me. I could finally breathe, finally start to heal. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into friendships that had been neglected during the turmoil of my marriage. I found strength in my own company, in the quiet moments of solitude. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side stronger, more resilient. I knew that I would be okay, that I would find happiness again. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, and I was ready to embrace the future on my own terms. Then one day, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked surprised to see me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the shame that he carried with him. He started to apologize, to explain himself, but I didn't want to hear it. I told him that I had moved on, that I was done with the past. He nodded, looking relieved, and we went our separate ways. I felt a strange sense of closure, knowing that I had finally let go of the anger, the resentment. I was free from the pain, free to create a new life for myself. Over time, I found myself thinking about Emily less and less. The memories of our marriage, of the life we had built together, began to fade. I knew that I had done the right thing, that I had made the right choice. I had freed myself from a life of lies, from a marriage that had been built on deceit. I was stronger now, more resilient, more determined to create a future that was filled with happiness, with love, with genuine connections. I had survived the darkness, had overcome the pain, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I was finally at peace, finally free from the chains of the past. One day, I received a message from Emily. She wanted to meet, to talk, to find closure. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to reopen old wounds, but in the end, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, and she looked nervous, unsure of what to say. She apologized, telling me that she regretted everything, that she wished she could take it all back. I listened, feeling a strange sense of calm. I realized that I no longer cared about the past, about the lies she had told. I had moved on, had found peace within myself. I told her that I forgave her, but that I had no interest in rekindling our relationship. I was done. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer burdened by the weight of our failed marriage, no longer haunted by the betrayal that had once consumed me. I was free to live my life on my own terms, to create a future that was filled with love, with happiness, with endless possibilities. I had reclaimed my life, had taken control of my destiny. I was stronger now, more resilient, more aware of my own worth. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, had risen above the darkness, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I was finally free. As the years went by, I continued to build a life that was filled with joy, with laughter, with genuine connections. I surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me, who valued me for who I was. I had reclaimed my life, had taken control of my future, and I was happier than I had ever been. I was free from the chains of the past, free to live my life on my own terms. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, had risen above the darkness, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was finally at peace, finally whole. I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be, surrounded by people who loved me. One evening, as I sat with friends at a cozy cafe, I found myself laughing, genuinely happy. I realized how much had changed, how far I'd come. I no longer felt the weight of Emily's betrayal, no longer carried the scars of our failed marriage. I had healed, had rebuilt myself from the ground up. I was surrounded by people who uplifted me, who valued me, and I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I had taken control of my life, had learned to trust myself again, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I was stronger, happier, and more at peace than I had ever been. As I walked home that night, I reflected on the journey I had taken to get to this point. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but I had come out the other side stronger. I no longer felt defined by the pain of my past. I was living a life that was entirely my own, filled with joy, with love, with purpose. I knew that I was capable of handling whatever challenges came my way, that I had the resilience to face anything. I had built a life that was filled with genuine connections, with people who valued me, and I was finally free. I was ready for whatever the future held. One day, I received a message from a mutual friend who had heard about my journey. She told me that she admired my strength, my resilience, my ability to rebuild my life. I felt a surge of gratitude, a sense of pride in how far I had come. I knew that I had made the right choice, that I had taken control of my own destiny. I was no longer defined by my marriage, by the lies that had once held me captive. I was living life on my own terms, embracing the freedom that I had worked so hard to achieve. I was free, finally at peace, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to focus on myself, on building a future that was filled with happiness, with love, with genuine connections. I was no longer haunted by the past, no longer weighed down by the pain of betrayal. I had let go of the anger, the resentment, the bitterness. I was free to live my life on my own terms, to create a future that was filled with endless possibilities. I surrounded myself with people who valued me, who uplifted me, and I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be. I was happy, I was whole, and I was finally at peace. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from Emily. She sounded different, calmer, more composed. She told me that she was moving away, that she wanted to start fresh in a new city. I felt a strange sense of closure, knowing that this chapter of my life was finally over. I wished her well, genuinely hoping that she would find the peace she was searching for. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of relief. I knew that I had made the right choice, that I had taken control of my life. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. Over time, I found myself reflecting less on the past and more on the future. I was excited for the possibilities, for the adventures that awaited me. I knew that I was strong enough to face anything that came my way, that I was resilient enough to overcome any challenge. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, had risen above the pain, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I was surrounded by love, by laughter, by genuine connections that filled my life with joy. I had reclaimed my life, had taken control of my future, and I was finally at peace. I was free, and I wasn't looking back. One day, as I walked through a park, I watched couples holding hands, families laughing, people enjoying life. I felt a sense of gratitude, a sense of joy that was entirely my own. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was whole just as I was. I had built a life that was filled with happiness, with love, with genuine connections. I had faced the darkness, had overcome the pain, and I was stronger for it. I was living life on my own terms, creating a future that was filled with hope, with endless possibilities. I was finally free, finally at peace, and I was ready for whatever came next. Then, one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the stars, I thought back to the journey that had brought me here. I had been through hell and back, had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. But I had survived, had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I knew that I was capable of facing anything, that I was ready for whatever the future held. I didn't need validation from anyone else. I was enough just as I was. I was living life on my own terms, creating a future that was filled with love, with joy, with endless possibilities. I was free, and I wasn't looking back. As the years went by, I continued to build a life that was filled with happiness, with laughter, with genuine connections. I surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me, who valued me for who I was. I knew that I was stronger now, more resilient, more determined to create a future that was entirely my own. I had faced the darkness, had overcome the pain, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was free from the chains of the past, free to live my life on my own terms. I had reclaimed my life, had taken control of my future, and I was finally at peace. I was free, and I was finally whole. Looking back, I realized that I had found happiness on my own, had built a life that was filled with hope and possibility. I was no longer defined by the mistakes of the past, no longer haunted by the pain that had once consumed me. I had found a sense of peace, a sense of joy that was entirely my own. I was free, free to live my life on my own terms, free to create a future that was filled with love, with happiness, with endless possibilities. I was finally at peace, finally whole, and I knew that the best was yet to come. I was ready for whatever life had in store. One afternoon, I received a message from an old friend who had heard about my journey. She told me that she admired my strength, my resilience, my ability to overcome the pain and rebuild my life. I felt a surge of gratitude, a sense of pride in how far I had come. I knew that I was capable of facing anything, that I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. I was no longer defined by my past, by the mistakes of others. I had reclaimed my life, had found a sense of peace, and I was ready to embrace the future on my own terms. I was free, and I wasn't looking back.